Welcome to the Norton School Committee budget meeting. We are being taped by Norton Media, so if anyone else is taping, let us know. We do the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There are some goodies over here in the monitor as well, thanks to Mike who brought them in from Food Services.
Okay.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Woohoo! We have 4 members of the school committee present, members of the administrative team for our traditional budget workshop that we do every year when we try to finalize our budget as we move forward. We did present capital. Sherry was actually, as your representative, was at the meeting the other day and requested $354,000 in capital expenditures for July 1st and FY21. And the first one was the payment second payment of the minibus on a 3-year payment plan that we received this past fall in October, and then we requested a second minibus, which would begin payment number 1 of that. We requested a one-time payment for a used athletic bus, minibus, gym floors, painting.
Sorry, 1 second. So the second payment on the minibus, the second minibus, and then another bus?
And then a part, yeah.
Minibus for athletics. Yes.
Yeah, we're saving money by doing it that way.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, it's the bus that we have right now is starting to fall apart. So, and then painting at $50,000 district-wide. One of the things as you know, I'm very proud of is that this administration, through you folks as the school committee, we're trying to keep our buildings up. So when the next person is on the school committee or the next person is the superintendent or part of the leadership team, we can always say that we continue to improve our buildings every year and not have to, wait decades in order to have to build a new building and all of that, which I don't see in the future. But things like painting, it's expensive, number one, and we can only do it during certain times of the year, which also actually increases the cost because it's in the summertime that we can do some of those paintings. So we want to do hallways. We've also added the second year of the Promethean board, interactive boards. We started with the 75,000. We're on the second 75, and that's part of a 5-year plan so that we can get them out into our buildings, and that's part of equity so that we don't have some students who have it and other students who don't. And then we want to start a 2-year phase in at 50,000 of bathroom partitions and auto flushers, because it saves on water, upgrades our bathrooms. As you know from the window project, those bathrooms have been upgraded, look really good, and they'll last for 50 years. So we want to do that. And then the floors replacement at the Hay, LGN, and JCS, the gym floors at about 60,000 a year, and that's over 3 years. And then
the high school was just done, right?
Yes, and then 50,000, and then floor replacements. We want to start looking at our tile floors where we're starting to see the 9-inch tiles are starting to break apart. Probably going to start with where they're most falling apart, which is hallways, main hallways, because that's a lot of foot traffic, more foot traffic than the actual classrooms. But also replacing sections of classrooms. As you remember, we did a 3-year plan at the middle school. We always had complaints about air quality. We always had complaints about this. It's gone. The moment we removed those carpets, now and we did that over 3 years with $60,000 a year, first floor, second floor, third floor, and it's really worked out. So we want to do the same thing at the other schools, starting with hallways and then moving into classroom sections as needed and so on. And Wade will be, I don't know, Wade, if you have anything else to add to that, but so it's not a huge request, but one of the things we try to articulate is that some of this is just planning. It's just to pay, instead of asking for 150,000 right away, we're willing to do 50,000 every year, which is beneficial to the capital plan as well. I don't know, Sherry, if there's anything else that.
I don't think so. Yeah,
Pretty.
we're still just collecting all the information, and then we'll start discussing it in a week after this Monday's
Right.
meeting.
Can I ask a
yeah.
question about the Promethean boards?
Yeah.
So when we get them, do they go to one school? How do we, like, do we do it so that each school gets something?
We
or-
started at the LG and JCS.
Yeah,
And then we did this school this year,
okay,
and now we're moving on to the middle school.
okay.
And we won't be able to do the entire middle school all at once, but if capital is approved, then we'll look at, do we do a grade level at a time?
Okay, and then, so the 3 schools that have it so far, 100% or?
I think we have a couple of maybe specialized classrooms that don't have them, but for the most part, they're 100% now.
Okay, that's great.
Okay. Matt put together an FY05 through FY20 variance for you to take a look at of town departments. So this looks at looks at every department. And I'll ask.
So there are 52 department lines, and what this does is it looks at how the tax dollars have been distributed amongst those 52 department lines, 05 through FY20. And you can see that the schools are about 2/3 of the way down the page, department number 300, and we're about 50% of the total budget. What is concerning about this is we are about 3.2% on average each year for our increase, whereas the town, if you look at the bottom line, the town overall has increased its budget by 3.84%. So we're below the town average when we're talking about our budget increases. So that is part of the reason why every year we have to look at our budget and drop that.
So this is, and part of the problem is that, remember, we had a 10-year period. I've been very lucky through you folks to have budgets that weren't at 1%. But remember that our average over 10 years prior to FY13 was 1.1%, including 2 years where the budgets were negative numbers, where, in other words, you weren't even level serviced, or I should say level funded. You were below that. So, and one of the years it was federal money that came in that actually put you over the top. So we have the most employees, we have the biggest square footage in buildings, we have the most acreage of everything. And again, the last few years, the budget has been, for lack of a better word, better. But we're just playing catch-up right now still. You probably have another 4 to 5 years of catch-up before it can become more reliable. And as you heard the other day, the town manager Mike put together the budget as a scenario at 3%, which you'll find out today doesn't fulfill our requirements if it was to be 3%. And again, that's just a starting point because Mike, James, myself, and Matt have been meeting. That was just a scenario type. They're looking at everything. Yesterday, healthcare numbers came out. Healthcare benefit numbers came out, and it seems to be better than actually was being looked at. Typically, we start with 5% or so, and it looks like it's going to come in under that, so that's a good thing as well. Okay.
And you have ranked largest to smallest on the side, ranked how? Like as far as increases?
By percentage increase, yes.
Okay.
Over that time period.
Okay.
Yeah.
And some of the departments you'll see are actually, for example, when you look at something like data processing and you see a 17.76.
Well, that's because it didn't exist.
It didn't
Yeah.
exist, number one, or two, the mandates required that it needed to get to a certain level. When you look at, the web committee, 156 right underneath it, I don't even know what that is, but I'm gonna guess, it's not being funded at all. The nice thing about all of this is when you look at, and it's not on here, I don't think, but when you look at the town stabilization account, that's going to be, it's right now somewhere in that $2.5 million range, which is actually pretty good for the size town that we have in terms of a budget. So, and we've only had to go into that account in my time here. The school departments had to go in once, and that was the year that we had a bunch of move-ins after after the budget season. Actually, it was actually June and July and August, where we had some special education move-ins that cost us about $800,000.
Are we giving this to the finance?
We can. I think we shared it last year.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
So, my one question on this, though, if we're looking at some of these smaller departments, they may be near the top just because they may have gotten a little, so it's not, I don't want to say it's a skewed number, but if we're basing it wholly on percentage.
Like the data processing wasn't around in, may not even been a department in 05.
Yeah.
Or that we had to change the federal requirements, state requirements required that you had to do X, Y, Z, so it costs you more. So we're not suggesting at all that any of these departments shouldn't be funded and not appropriately funded. But what we are suggesting is that when you look at a department that has the most personnel and everything else, those numbers just don't
It should at
align.
least be close.
Okay. And then you have 2 handouts on FY21 that were prepared for today. And I want to go through those. If you'd start with the one that has a 9.0, it's pink highlighted for you. I agree. So the way that we did this is we did a traditional bottom-up budget process where every teacher, every employee, everyone in the district was asked to go to provide their direct supervisor any budget requests. And we had over $3.5 million worth of requests that came forward, which is a good thing because finally it seems like our staff is understanding that before you go to some fundraising online or something, that put it into the budget process, right? And we're going to see if we can, over time, get you those needs if they're appropriate. So that's a check off for us. That's a win-win. We actually had departments that came forward or grade levels that came forward and said we could really, this could be really positive if we could do this. So now at least we have it in writing. We can put it into our scenarios, and then we can take a look at when is the best time for us to do that, which has always been something that I've wanted to do with our staff. But what you have in front of you is a breakdown of the first recommendation, if you will, or the general recommendation, which is mandated and general education, with mandated coming in at 2.8% increase and general education coming in at 6.23% increase. The actual cost center increase, in other words, to the actual department itself, as special ed, or mandated, I should say, is looking at an increase of 8.24. Yes?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
It says mandated and it says special education, but are the ELL increases included in the mandated?
ELL, I'm not,
Because that would change.
Only because that is also mandated
Right.
education, it's not just special education that is considered
yeah, I
mandated.
think the mandated education is basically special education. So if ELL is not governed by Gene, then it's included under the general education budget.
So we need
Which
to
is
move
fine,
it.
but I just want to make the point
We'll
that
have
it's
to move it
also
into
mandated
that.
education.
We'll move it into that as well.
Okay, thank you.
So that'll change the numbers a little bit. They're not much because it's not a huge
No,
department.
it's
but-
a staff person.
Yeah, it's
But it
a,
still should be.
yeah, should still be in that
We are
area.
legally required to provide those services, so yes.
And you could actually break that down that anybody's in charge of a 504, for example, that their percentage of their job
Correct.
belongs
Also
in
mandated
mandated.
education.
So we could look at that in the future as a way to show mandates. But what's interesting about all of this is that when you take a look at the numbers here, and you end up with a $2.7 million increase or 9.03%, what you end up with is a budget number of, what is, if you will, required, needed on a day-to-day. I'm not going to be recommending that, but I wanted to show you that just simply so that you could see it, and I want to break it down because it's important for us to break this down like we do every year. And so on the next page, you start to see the breakdowns of actually what I think was asked the other day in terms of can we have a breakdown of the budget, in terms of expenditures.
What's the percentage increase on cost center? I don't understand.
So the cost center would be that department, so mandated. So as an increase to that department, it's X. As a percentage to the entire budget, it's Y. Okay? So on the next page, what you start to see is you start to take a look on the left side where you're looking at, and again, we'll call that sped salaries. We'll probably just change that so that it's reflective of Jen's comment, more like just call it mandated. We'll change that language so that we're consistent from year to year. But as you can see, we're really looking at a budget that is about personnel, right? So the cost of personnel in almost every school budget is the number one thing. It is what it is. You need people, as I say every year. If we don't have teachers in front of kids, we're really just a correctional facility. We're a jail. We're not an institution of learning in terms of educating kids, because you need to have professionals, highly trained, highly qualified and trained professionals. And then as you break down expenses, you'll see again that our expense line is not anything that is out of this world, if you will, in terms of the number, but it is what it is in terms of the needs that are required for us to have in every building, in every program, and so on. Then you have all your salaries, and this is where you see the biggest expenses in terms of the operating budget. And then you have the budget requests that are noted, and then you have the actual total budget at 2.7. So this is how it works. It's salaries, it's expenses, it's requests, and here's your total of 9.03%. That makes sense? So when you move to the next page, you'll start to see what the new staff is and what we're considering for a reorganization of staff. So in this particular case, we're looking at a dean of students at the high school. As you know, this has been a big discussion because of just trying to make it a safer place in terms of the day-to-day operations. The dean of students position is not an administrative position, it's a Unit A teaching position, belongs to the teachers union. American Sign Language teacher, which is .2, we're looking to start the program next year. Same, taking the music teacher and moving that second music teacher from .8 to 1.0. And then we're looking at a special education teacher at the high school to meet the mandates, an ESL teacher district-wide, and then we are moving the continuation of our internal special ed programs, where we now need to move BEST into the middle school as well. So this is part of that, you know, all of these classrooms that we've added that have actually long-term saved us millions of dollars, short-term as well, but long-term as well, by having students stay in the district. So we can't just take a teacher from the Hayes School specialized program and move them. We have to actually start a program for incoming students at the middle school level. So that's going to require a full-time special ed teacher and a full-time paraprofessional. And then really at the last hour, we started to really take a look at our nursing. We had almost 21,000 nurse visits last year in 5 buildings with 2,500 students. What's that tell you? That tells you allergies, medications are up. Of course, sickness is always part of that. We have to test, do screenings with every student every year in every building. So we have a number of students that are under specialized care in terms of needs. We have students that are checking into the nurse 10, 15, 20 times a day because of medical conditions, in terms of when they eat, how they eat, sugar testing, you know, all of that stuff with diabetes and so on and so forth. We have students who just are in need of our support medically in order to be in school on a regular basis. So we're thinking here of adding a district-wide nurse. This would be our 6th nurse, which would also help with the week before vacation, we had 2 schools in 2 days without a nurse all day because we could not find a nurse to sub.
Is that legal?
It's not illegal. It's not required to have a nurse in the school building. It's recommended. It's not required.
That's scary.
Right.
It is scary, right? The idea that you don't have a medically expert, but it can happen, and it causes us a lot of stress when it happens.
So in that case, like a child that needs medication, it would be an administrator doing it?
No, we literally leave a building with a nurse unoccupied and send them over to do that. So that's how it happens. We also have nurses who aren't able to take personal days because they're you know, they get it. They're the last, you know, they're the point of the last straw, if you will. So they're just, you know, they're trying to find the nurses, and it really isn't the money. It's just, you know, because I think we're paying $150 $150 now
Yeah,
for a
we
nurse.
increased it significantly. I think part of the problem is we do have a few sub-nurses, but they have jobs in hospitals and things like that, so they're only available to us on a limited basis. So in order for a nurse to plan a day, they have to plan way out to be able to have somebody come in. But I think that, and we have several students that have medical needs, where we have to have a nurse or have to have somebody available, or we're calling the parent and saying, this is what's happening today, just so you know. So I think this float nurse position would really go a long way to be able to have a level of comfortability and comfort in terms of care of students.
And we also, like anyone else, they can get sick and, you know, wake up with the flu themselves and so on and so forth. So it's
When the ambulance is called, depending on what the problem is, does the nurse go with the child, or is it?
typically not. Typically, we'd like to send an administrator or someone else just because we want to keep the building still safe.
Right, okay.
Or we send the student, in a lot of cases, our parents would prefer to come to the school and take the child themselves instead of the, you know, I hate to say it, but the scariness of the ambulance,
Yeah.
especially with the young students.
Right.
The biggest issue that usually happens with hospitalization is mental health. It's actually not, you know, if you will, somebody's hurt, somebody's mental health is hurt, but it's not because they broke a bone or something. It's typically, we're really worried about the psychology of someone and them hurting themselves. And so they might be ambulanced to a facility, and then the parents are asked to meet them there, that type of stuff. But we've had administrators go, we've had a teacher who knew the student go and then covered the class. You know, we've had paraprofessionals go. I mean, it's really who knows the child, who's available, and who can act to make a supportive decision, if you will, because, you know, the decisions do belong to the parents, if that makes sense. The reorganization of staff is really taking a look at a couple of things. Number one, we have verbal communication about retirements, right? And we have two folks that have come forward and really said, you know, I'm ready to retire. Without getting into too much specifics, because of these folks always ask that we not talk about their retirements publicly. They'd like to wait until closer to the end of the year. But the impact is significantly in special education. We are going to be hiring all of those positions in terms of special education teachers. Right now, besides the BEST program, needing a special ed, which, by the way, that could mean that somebody wants it internally. So without looking at all of that stuff, we're going to be looking for 4 full-time special ed teachers for next year. That's a significant hiring process. So I anticipate putting out a tentative hiring probably within the next 2 weeks, because we really want to take a look at candidates sooner than later, because we're going to need them. We're going to have to commit to those folks, and we're going to have to try to find hopefully a balance of really good people, which means we're not necessarily just looking at someone who's a step 1 person. First of all, they're not really out there, but trying to find 4 special ed teachers in 1 year is not going to be easy, I don't think. So I think we're going to be, for lack of a better word, recruiting from other districts to come work for us. And
So we're saying that we're saying that we have some retirements that are coming up, and we're replacing the general ed teachers with special needs teachers.
We're actually replacing a general ed teacher that's retiring, and then 3 special ed teachers that are retiring.
Okay.
Plus, we're needing a 4th special ed teacher for the BEST program at the middle school.
Okay.
So, but what we see here is the availability of some savings. So those savings, as I said, the Thursday night, and I said Wednesday as well, our savings this year are going towards filling positions that we need right away. So where does that come in? I would like to do a couple of things. I'd like to make a commitment to kindergarten. I'd like to make a commitment to kindergarten today, as part of your budget vote later on today and then next week. And the reason for that is, as you know, I usually try to save 1 kindergarten position in the budget every year. I'm actually looking to do that for 2, and I'd like to see if I can get those class sizes under 20 students. That's my goal. I actually would like to see if I can cap them at 18. That's our recommendation. That's a commitment that I want to make to the staff. Of course, you know, I could say 18 and then all of a sudden there's an enrollment increase that happens, but at least I'm making the commitment now to the best of our ability. Because as you heard me say the other day, studies are very clear that K1 is the most important class size time period in education. There's no doubt about it. Good class sizes are important in general, but in terms of K1, it's the most important. And as someone who is came from secondary education and has spent most of my career as a superintendent has been to learn more and more about elementary ed. As you know, I spent half a day this year in the preschool, on our Little Lancers preschool. I've never had a more tiring day in my entire life. Every bone in my body was hurting by noon. But what I saw, besides committed and professional staff, is how hard it is. And I'm not suggesting that it's not hard everywhere else. I'm just saying it's just, preschool is different. It's that simple. But kindergarten is as well. And I've been spending a lot of time visiting kindergarten classrooms and so forth. And during my last few years of being a superintendent, and it's just different. And by the time the coats come off, and in the wintertime, the gloves and the hats and everything else, you're an hour into the school day. You know, same thing on the other end. So getting those class sizes lower is better. And then I think in supporting the needs of students, it's as important, because the more we can target students' learning potentials in kindergarten, or their learning disabilities, if you will, in kindergarten, the better the better for education and the better financially it is for our budget. Because if we can target those students for those services early on, we know that by the time they get older that they potentially are coming off of some of those. And the more aggressive we are there, long term, the better we are in terms of graduations, in terms of where students are going in their education, in terms of mental health, in terms of their learning. So that's one. And I know I don't have to make this argument with you because I know you believe it, but just to enter into the record. And then, so there's the retirement savings. And then the potential for us to hire 2 grade 3 teachers in the JCS and the LGN, because right now our projected class sizes are 25 to 26. And I'd like to bring those down into that 20 to 22 range. So that means, unfortunately for my colleague here at the Hay, Mr. Gagan, it really means that he's potentially, and again, I'm using the word potentially because things shift and they happen. We could have 4 people decide to go work for another school system next year, and we save money, and now maybe we're not shifting. The savings allows us to recruit 2 new people. And as you know, I try to keep those things available to us as much as possible. But we do have a decline in enrollment of that bubble that's going through that I mentioned the other day. And so 4 and 5, keeping those classrooms at 23 to 26 is not the best, but it's better here than it would be at grade 3. It's also the first time that they test on the state assessment. Even though we don't consider it a grade 3 test, we consider it a comprehensive elementary assessment, the first assessment that they take at the state level beyond. So that's what we're thinking of doing as part of this budget, is shifting personnel, not adding personnel, okay? And I'll keep you up to date as things change, as staff communicates with us that they're leaving, coming back, or whatever the case. We have some, I think, is it March 1st or is it the March 31st on response?
It depends on what they're.
Yeah, so the leaves of absence, folks, we have
No, it's like what type of absence, if they're on
Right.
a leave of absence versus.
Right, career absence versus medical.
Maternity leave.
Right.
So I believe the maternity leave is March 1st, and then the leaves of absence are the 31st.
Mm-hmm.
We're
So
starting to hear.
Yeah, so we've had a commitment from one person who said, you know, they will not be coming back. We have a commitment from someone who says, I am coming back. So that's just 2 that I know of. And again, based on the contract and the dates and all of that.
And how many are out there?
We're still waiting for 2 more.
Two more. One in middle school and one at the high school.
Yep.
So there's 4 total that are on leaves,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, combination of either maternity, took the year off because of maternal leave, or took second career leave, or family leave. One of them is a family leave. And that's for different reasons. It could be because of child rearing situations. It could be, we have at least 1 potential teacher this year that will be potentially moving. but because of their spouse. And then what that causes is they're always worried about, well, what happens if it doesn't work out? You know, so those are the scenarios that we usually run into. And we've already posted for a middle school science position because we have a long-term sub replacing one of those people that's not coming back, is committed to not coming back. So we've already posted that job so that we can hire that position sooner than later. So that's how this looks. And these scenarios look a little bit different. And then every page after that, the next page really takes a look at school choice. And it's basically like all the school choices that we have. There's a projected $1,042,000 in school choice, which includes a carryover from FY '20. But we're using $773,000 in this budget. So, you know, leaving us with a balance of about $268,000, I can assure you that some of that will be used the remainder of this year, just because of scenarios that we have with requests that I forward to you in terms of our needs. On the right-hand side, you have our revolving accounts, and we have that wonderful word that is used in the business field, Delta. I love that word. The only Delta I know is the one I fly.
Thank God you could add it in because Dinesh wasn't here.
Yeah, he would be talking about deltas and what does he call them? Points or I can't remember.
Basis points.
Bits. Every time he says bits, I have no idea. Sorry. But basically, what we're doing here is the delta is basically showing us the positive or negative of that account and how we see it. So we have school lunch, facilities, transportation, parking, athletic, tuition, club fees, and the Little Lancers. And of course, Little Lancers, we're going to be recommending a 3% increase. And that's simply because we don't want to get into these hundreds and hundreds of dollars increases. I think it's much better if we increase it by, 3 to 5% every year. It's better to say to people it's going up $25 in terms of those families that are paying than it is to say, well, we're going to go up $300 in 1 year. So, which is, as you know, is something we did a few years back. I'd rather just say to you, cost of living and expenses and everything else, and that won't cover the full increase that happens to salaries and expenses. But as you know, it provides a service. We have 113 kids in that program, and growing every day. We know at least 4 more students coming in with significant needs over the course of the next couple of months. And we're actually, as of Friday, actually Thursday, Jean and I and then Matt received a request from Jean in terms of speech and occupational therapy, where we're in need of some more staffing and support. So we have folks available who work part-time for us as assistants that we can actually potentially move in. And then I actually also have contact with someone from Worcester State who's actually learning to become or going to grad school for speech pathology. He's also available to come to work for us. So those will be decisions that we'll work through Jean's office. But we want to support those people because their caseloads are getting to the point of, or already are at the point of, it's difficult to service the kids. So we heard that from the staff in the last few weeks, and we plan on acting on that as soon as next week. So just to let you know.
The school lunch fund, do we have a balance with that?
So school lunch, currently, we're still a little bit early on the projection, but we're projecting that we're probably gonna have to cover at least $50,000 with appropriation funds, could be as high as 100. We're working really hard to keep that at 50. So we're steadily stepping that back, whereas a couple years ago, we were supporting over $200,000 through appropriations and town funding. Last year, we got it down to right around 100,000. This year, our target is to get it down to 50, being supported by appropriation funds, and eventually trying to get those efficiencies and wean us to a self-sufficient program. This year, we are looking, again, like Little Lancers, where we're going to ask for a 3% maintenance increase. That's just to keep ahead of the federally mandated weighted minimum.
You have to be within the dime of the federal reimbursement, if you will.
Yeah.
So I'd rather go up 10, 15 cents than say it's going to be $1, and and it hurts folks even more. The other thing is, I'm glad that you brought up this question. The other thing is, don't forget that we're projecting based upon what we know and our information. And so if 30 less students are here next year, that has a direct impact on that expense line. you know, it doesn't, you know, you still have the same number of people working, it's still the same contract, and even though it's a private contract. Food services is every school system's biggest headache in terms of operational money. To go from 6 figures down to potentially 100,000, somewhere around 50 to 100,000 is a good thing in year 2. We'll enter in year 3 next year. Hopefully we see an improvement again. When it comes to our high school, our numbers are really good. When it comes to our middle school, the numbers aren't as good. And so we'll have those discussions with Chartwells about next year and maybe making some further changes to our middle grade offerings. And then our elementary offerings are all over the place. I mean, we have kids who eat lunch every day, then we have kids who eat once a week, only pizza day, or only this or only that, and
Or not at all.
or not at all.
Carrot sticks, everything.
Yeah, carrot sticks. And then
Sorry.
this was asked of us as well. This will be stuff, by the way, we'll be sharing with the FinCom when we have another meeting with them on the 12th, and then we have our presentation on the 16th. So this is the grants. So we have the nurse grant, we have the early education, we have the IDEA grant. We have Title I. There's a potential reduction there, although I'm starting to hear some better language coming out. Go ahead.
Title I at the federal level is seeing a $453 million increase. Massachusetts is not going to get any of that funding.
Right.
Because when you take a look nationally, we have much fewer students that are considered low income than states out west and down south. So Massachusetts is not going to see any of that. We will see a reduction as a state.
And then-
Whether we'll see this kind of reduction as a community, I think we will not this current year, but we are right on that cusp of really cutting it down.
Thanks for the positive news, Jen.
Well, I spent the whole day on it yesterday. It was very
Yeah,
interesting.
I figured. Title IIA and then Title IVA, again, projections that we're just going to be maintaining on all of these. Hopefully, we don't see it. Circuit breaker. Now, this is only circuit breaker based on tuition. We are not projecting any money in circuit breaker transportation. And the reason why we're not is because we have nothing from anybody saying we're going to get anything. So why would I even project that we're going to get something if we don't have that commitment, that there's a potential. But we're going to be using, we're counting on 65% reimbursement. Hopefully it'll be better than that. But we're going to be using all of it in our budget, like we do, you know, yearly. We project out 65%, we put it right into our budget. So when you combine circuit breaker and then IDEA, IDEA, by the way, is predominantly all with paraprofessionals, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So that's a staffing. You know, you're talking about, you know, in the vicinity of $1.5 million worth of grants and circuit breaker alone for special education. So that's important to remember. And then, so our total grants and revolving, we have a delta of about $400,000. So right now, that's what we're going with, and we'll see how accurate we are. If Matt is accurate, he gets a raise. If he doesn't, he gets a 0, just like the budget. Sorry. And then everything else after that, we'll make some changes because we'll add the ELL to this. But everything else after that is really line items. So this is like the other day we were asked about our line items. This is what we print every month for you, and we provide to the FinCom. And now we're going to provide it to the Board of Selectmen and anybody else who wants it. I'm actually thinking what we should do is just put it on our website and email them and say, please go to our website and get it. But here it is. So if you want to know how much we're paying for grounds or buildings or heating, I mean, it says it right there. It's you know, if you want to know it by building, that's a separate request. We'd have to break it out. But we can do that by giving you a copy of the bills. Here it is. Make your own determinations. So that's the total that's coming in. Here's the difference. When you move on to the next budget, what I did is, working with Matt, we brought the budget down to 6.15% as our recommended budget to you, and of course you guys have the right to change it in any way that you want. And so second page is where you start to see what we did. So Right now, for the sake of discussion, we're taking a look at some of the technology that we have and putting it off out of the budget and off to the side, potentially under choice funds. If you know, depending on what the final choice numbers look like. These are all difficult and not easy situations. I think Karen's here. Feel free, Karen, to add to this discussion.
In terms of the iPads for elementary, it's a concern because of the math program that we have.
we use.
We just don't have the available.
So that would be a priority one to return back to the budget or for choice use. Because we don't want to have a curriculum that's utilizing technology to support students and then not have the technology for them. So that would be a priority one. And it's not a huge hit. $15,000 is not
That's actually
huge.
number 2.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, 30,000, sorry. Sorry about that, I didn't read it the right way. So those would be things that we'll prioritize with the school committee in terms of let's just utilize the school choice funds. We might even be able to do it by the end of the school year and order them as part of the choice at the end of the year, because if we have 100,000 left in choice, we might say, let's make this the priority and get them in right away so we can have them for the fall.
So are these 3 things already under choice in the other budget, being paid for?
Yes, that's correct.
So taking out,
So we're taking out, which frees up choice funds, which allows us to move into.
so if we did do this, this wouldn't be additional choice funds, this would be replacing what we didn't do.
Yeah, so what we're doing with this 110, we're now moving education material purchases out of the appropriation budget onto school choice.
So my biggest concern that actually comes from Dinesh more than anyone, and unfortunately he's not here, but as you know, we don't want to have consistent line items. So our effort through Karen and Jen and Jean and everyone else involved has been year 1, if it's 100,000 in school choice, by year 2, we want to move at least 1/3 of that into the operating budget, if not a half, so that we are not counting on that. I can't guarantee you that those funds are going to be there. And I sure as heck, I mean, we would not have one-to-one technology today if it wasn't for choice. I want you to think about that. We would not have curriculum areas if it wasn't for choice. So 138 students that are choosing Norton Public Schools as its destination for learning because we're good are providing 2,400 students who reside in the town all of this technology. Think about that. That's pretty significant when you think about that.
Every textbook, every teacher resource, every classroom library book that we've purchased over the last at least 3 years has solely come from choice, K to 12. So we've replaced math books with updated our elementary literacy program. We've done science and social studies at the middle school.
I would call that appropriate use of new revenue. And I would say, you know, and it's not a pat on my back, but our back is we're bringing in $1 million worth of revenue. That didn't happen prior to 2014. That's pretty significant for the town to recognize. And it's making sure that we're competitive. You got to remember that between all 5 of our schools, and those of us that are at my level or at central office or at the building level that are able to get out and see other schools, you know, I always say this, Vinny just recently, and congratulations to him, we should say, the school continued on its NELMS Spotlight School. So congratulations to them. We just did a public release yesterday. Congratulations to him and his leadership and team and the teachers there. But Vinny, I don't know if you want to share the technology comment you made about a visit that you made to another school in Connecticut.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I went to another school, Old Saybrook, Connecticut, a great school, Spotlight School, where I evaluated them because I'm on the NELMS board, and they're doing fantastic things and many things that, you know, a few things I was envious of, just a couple, not many, but a few. But otherwise, a great school, and they had not made the move to one-to-one. And they had great furniture, everything for collaboration, but they said they wanted to make sure they were ready. And then I asked them, I said, well, what will signal you that you're ready? And they didn't even know. And in these great, fantastic rooms, they had these huge corners with just tables with all sorts of like 5 or 6 monitors. And it just seemed like walking into a room with like a tube TV. it seemed so foreign. I was like, it just seemed odd. I looked at it like it was looking at like a rotary, like a rotary phone.
And the envious part is actually yesterday at the learning walk, and Jean was with me as well, and we did learning walks at the middle school, which were excellent, by the way. It was actually really inspiring to see some of the stuff going on at the middle school yesterday. But one of the things I noticed is that the traditional 1997 education of an individual desk is not appropriate for middle school. And they were doing actually a interdisciplinary mummification in social studies, but connected to science, right? And it's not a lab table, so you've got stuff all over the place, and it's really, to be quite honest, not even safe. Because so to look at a place that has the furniture, and I actually saw some of the pictures, that I'm like, okay, that's what we need. But then, so we got the other part though. We got the technology we now we need, and furniture is, as you guys know, what I say with Wade's facilities department, it's not sexy, right? It's not something that people are like, oh, furniture, yay, look at that, that's going to improve everything. It does. It does, because it allows for what take a look at what business industries are doing today, right? Take a look at businesses. Everybody's in an open, no one's in an office anymore. Everybody's in these huge collaboration rooms and all of that. So hopefully that's something that we're going to be able to do. So enough about that.
Weren't we looking at furniture?
Yeah, it's part of our capital. What we need to do with furniture, and I think Sherry knows this more than anyone, is we need to study what we want to do for furniture. I hate to say it that way, but we're not at a point where we can say that's what we want. We need to do some more site visits, maybe take a look at some of these new schools that are being built, seeing what they're putting in. We probably would have already, if our high school was being built today, or renovated today, we probably would have made changes to the furniture that we ordered just 5 years ago for the high school, because it's just the change this significant change that's taken place.
Well, we saw too down at the conference, Jen, those chairs and cool stuff. Oh, they were amazing. But
Still remember the desks that would, like, you slide in, if you were left-handed, you were out of luck.
Yeah.
And actually, it was, a friend of mine works in another district, and they were selling off surplus, and there was those desks. I'm like, that's an antique. You should hold on to that.
Yeah.
But I mean, and that's the thing, is furniture is ever changing. I mean, what's necessary for the elementary school, like the yoga ball, would be in your school that would be throwing them at each other. It's just the not your school, but just the age difference in.
Yeah, I would say, or if I could add, we've done great stuff with the one-to-one, which we've talked about at the start of this meeting, and with the choice funds, and the Promethean boards is another thing, and we have mobile technology in the one-to-one. We can move the carts, and we have thousands of pounds of old metal furniture in the middle of the room, so the movement's not happening like we would imagine. It is this furniture that we currently have literally undercuts the investments that we made in transformable technology. So teachers still can't plan a lesson that's going to have multiple parts where the kids are going to incorporate movement. We talk about losing recess at the middle school. Well, the idea is that we'd have movement built into our instruction, that they'd get up, they'd move around. So this furniture is literally undercutting all the investments that we've made to have transformable, adaptable classrooms. You cannot ask, 85-pound 11-year-olds to stop moving desks around and get into these kind of different configurations. Mind you, with the slanted desktop and a Chromebook that we spent a lot of money on sitting on top. So teachers are hesitant to just start reshaping the room midstream. So, and the slanted desks don't help with the Chromebooks at all. So really, I think that's the next step, is the furniture that will really, bolster all the investments that we've already made.
And then we have reductions to appropriations budget, where we are literally cutting our budget further, or utilizing choice funds, so taking it out of operations, and you see the breakdown there that's taking place. I've been talking to the town manager about things like substitutes. It's so difficult to project maternity leaves and health leaves. It just is. It's a constant wavering number, an issue that takes place every single year, and we're very happy that people are having family and healthy children and all that, but at the same time, it's a budget scenario problem for us. So we've reduced that by 862,000 and potentially going to reduce it even more.
So real important, one thing that we want to point out on this reduction is we are not reducing fees. So we have built in that we're going to reduce the transportation fee into that 9% budget. With this, we've pulled that out. We cannot afford to reduce the fees.
So, but the fee is $350.
$350,
Okay.
we'll remain at $350. That's just.
So in this
sure.
budget, it was taken out and
Yeah.
the fee is dropped in this budget.
The fee-
We're keeping that.
Yeah. One other thing that we did is through Aaron's recommendation in one of our original budgets that didn't even end up on the 9% budget was to actually move all of our middle school budgets, coaches' salaries and all that into the operating budget. Still having to collect fees, but as you know, they're fully operational by parents. But moving that $30,000 worth of coaching and move it right into the operating budget. And that's still a scenario that we would like to do because we always run into issues with that budget anyways. In terms of, as I mean, some of you know because you did it yourselves. You know, the kids are paying the $350, and then they're still having to, you know, fundraise and do other things. In most cases, it's cut another check to balance that budget. So Aaron's recommendation was to move that $30,000 into operations, still collect fees only, and parents can still be involved with everything that they do, but you're not counting on them for every penny of that budget. Very much like we did with lacrosse and hockey and those type of things. It's a small piece of the budget. It's something that maybe we can still do. It'd be very beneficial to families. Transportation, I mean, I'd really like to cut that fee, but in order to cut that fee, we've got to find that six-figure number somewhere. It's between $95,000 and $100,000 to cut that to, let's say, $250,000. We just don't have it. I mean, we can maybe anticipate trying to do it for the fall town meeting and recognize that it gets added to our operational budget, but every year just taking a chance. Eventually, as you know, free cash is going to get less and less in the next few years. So that's the scenario. We did play it out for both sports and activities and busing, but I just don't know how you're going to come up with somewhere in the vicinity of $350,000 worth of trying to make it a better scenario. So
can you just clarify though, the 9% budget, we still have the same athletic fee and bus fee, or no?
Same athletic fee, but we were reducing the transportation fee.
Right, so what were you reducing the transportation fee to?
I think it was 175.
175, yeah.
Cutting it by 50%, which added over $100,000.
Yeah, 105.94.
And athletic fee stays the same?
Right. Part of that is that the expense line for us in athletics continues to go up every year. I mean, transportation does as well, but transportation is actually easier for us to maintain because we know that the budget's going up 2 or 3% on that because it's a contractual number versus sports, everything's changing. We just got a wonderful text message from Aaron on Thursday or Friday, was it Friday?
Yeah, yesterday.
Led to some interesting commentary between us. That's not appropriate for TV. But the MIAA voted by was it 190 to 140?
140, yeah.
That we're going statewide for, explain it for me.
So basically, it's going to be a statewide tournament instead of sectionals. So potentially, we could be playing, Norton could be playing a team in the western part of the state in the first round of the tournament, which instead of a $300 or $400 bus ride, it's going to be a $1,200 or $1,500 bus ride. Potentially, maybe even looking at reimbursing for, you know, depending on what sport it is and what time it is and when the next game is, you know, when are you going to be doing these things? On the other end, even for Wade, they're talking, well, we'll do more on the weekend. Well, now we have to staff the building on the weekend. So there's a lot of unintended consequences that'll happen that will raise the, you know, increase how much it costs.
Was it the 50 private schools that all voted in favor of it?
I'm sure they did,
I'm
yes.
sure they did.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the cities did, and yada, yada, yada. There is no group that gets under my skin more than the MIAA and the way that they run things. But again, I will refrain, since it's an open meeting, from commenting any further.
I just want to mention, I think one of the hard things too with and the other budget, the 9% budget, reducing the transportation fee to 175 from 350, that's a one-time fee every year for people.
Yeah.
The athletic fee is, you have a kid who plays 3 sports, you're paying that times 3.
Sure.
So that's a huge,
Times 2 kids.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a huge fee for parents. I mean, the transportation, it is what it is, it's one time, but that athletic fee is just out of control, and I think it's limiting kids' choices of what they want to do. I think it's something that we really need to look at. It's been long enough.
We have, but the question becomes, where does the money come from?
Yeah, I don't know the
I mean,
answer to
that's the
that.
problem. I mean, we started our budget process by, I had a scenario that I asked Matt to run that was saving, if I remember, it was going to cost us about just under $100,000 by just moving to 250 from 350 and capping it at 2 sports, not 3 sports, and all of that. And it's just it's a money. It's you know, where does it come from?
I get it. I just think at this point, it's been so many years that since we've increased it, I think that we all know that sports can keep kids out of trouble.
Yep.
And I just think it's, you know, when I'm starting to hear stories of kids not being able to play a sport because of a fee, that's very concerning to me. I just think we really need to look at that.
It's a direct positive to families. And in this day and age, as you know, I don't have to tell you this, but we've had an impact of requests for private donations more so this year than probably in the last 5 years put together. Actually, I can state that as a fact that I know of.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean any other administrator, guidance counselor that works with families, and it even doesn't come to me.
Wait, are you saying that donations are coming in or they're being asked for?
No, they're being asked for.
We're being petitioned.
Yeah.
We have one coming on Friday even, late in the day, so they just keep coming.
And it's true stories. You know, it's not, I mean, it's, and we have people who aren't coming forward that we know about that we're going to and say, no, you need, we have a resource, we have a donor, we have someone who can donate some funds. They don't know your name, they won't know your name, but here's the grant. This puts a roof over your head for a month. And that's real. It's you know, it's real. I mean, we're vetting these situations pretty hard by checking and so on. Or we're not giving direct money. We're actually, you know, paying someone's rent by giving it to the owner directly, you know, in their name. So, you know, so that we know that the funds are being, you know, no questions asked. We have kids with sports fees that as they come to us, we're finding them out, figuring them out through donors. It takes a community has been a huge donor for the public schools. As we know, we have a big fundraiser this coming Friday. So hopefully, if this is aired, Friday, March 6th at 7 o'clock, 100% of those funds go directly to Norton families in need, and that's and other families actually, to be quite honest. We have a number of companies that I just make a phone call and say, can I get a $150 donation? And within 24 hours, we get a check. I mean, that's what we've been doing, but more so this year than ever before. So I hear you, and we can definitely put together whatever the final budget is. We can get it ready for you for next Wednesday for our school committee and say, you know, we are appropriating, we're going to vote on this budget as our final budget, and it will include a fee reduction for blah, 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 blah. So maybe instead of $175 for transportation, it'll be $250, and maybe sports will be $250 and it's capped for families, or something that looks like a scenario that we can at least present. Now, if it has to be cut later, you're gonna have to make a decision on what gets cut. It's either that or something else, as you get to that scenario. Or can we get a commitment that if there are funds available in the fall, that we can get a verbal commitment that offsetting the cost for families is something that as a community we should be doing. And so let's prioritize that 6-figure number in the fall.
Well, what's happening with the Booster Club?
Dead.
Because they were, I mean, when we talked to the other towns, they put together this big thing, and that's how they got everything that they got. So
It's dead.
ours is not.
It's probably my biggest disappointment as your superintendent, because it's been something that, as you know, was high on my list of trying to do when I got here in 2013, because I see it as a huge benefit to our athletic program. But there just isn't enough trust and commitment to want to potentially do that.
I think one of the biggest issues was the board that was in place. There was a person who was the treasurer who came and met with us at one of our meetings. And for her to try to figure out 20-something booster clubs to put into one was completely overwhelming. You really need an accountant and an attorney to set that up the right way. So, you know, we talked to Joe about getting maybe an attorney in town who would be interested in helping us kind of pro bono to set this up. I think once that happened, then things could have happened a little bit more. And plus, it's been a couple of years now, new people are in place. I mean, at some point, it has to happen. We just need the help to get there. We need the help to set this up the right way from the beginning. I don't think it's fair to ask a volunteer to look at all of the bylaws and try to put everything into one category. Just was overwhelming and a little bit risky for a volunteer to do.
Do we have any booster clubs that, I don't want to say donate back to the athletic, like, are there booster clubs that are raising money for offset of fees, or are they raising money for, you know, the newest swag or the newest uniforms? Or
I'll defer to Aaron, but I'm pretty sure it's all about whoever.
It's equipment.
It's equipment.
It's a lot of facilities things they help with. And then it's, you know, practice uniforms and things like that.
But I know for hockey, there's been times where if there's an issue with a kid paying the athletic fee because ours is more expensive, then we have covered that athletic fee so that they can play.
Wrestling as well.
Yeah.
Softball as well.
Yep.
I think the interesting part about sort of the booster organization is that, so, you know, you play a seasonal sport. So for example, in the fall, my daughter was part of a sport that had, I think, 3 different fundraisers. So in, 2 months? We were sort of asked to, I think, sell, I don't even remember what it was, but I remember saying, didn't you just have a fundraiser? So in one sport, there was the fee, and then there was also the responsibility of the players to do 3 different kind of ways to make some extra money. And I understand the reason why they had to do that. But I think that that was sort of the goal of creating this one booster organization, right? Was so that the sports could all be supported with equity, and because it really became a little frustrating doing 3 fundraisers in 2 months. There's only so many people you can ask to do something.
And Carolyn, I think speaking to that too, I think, you know, as a former coach and a principal, you know, I was involved with fundraising with my student athletes as a coach, and we had a specific fundraiser with a 100% donation to a third cause. None of it came back to us. The idea was that as a team, we were a team, we collected money together for the purposes of the food pantry. Not for us, because that's what it should be about. I mean, kids shouldn't be out there looking for fundraising for themselves. Or it should be for a cause, because that's what brings a team together, right? The idea of fundraising, it should be that the uniforms and the equipment, that should be 100% in our budget, right? Salaries, 100% in our budget, right? It shouldn't be about, you know, they're going to get the quote, the latest swag. Well, maybe we don't get the latest swag, but what we have is the best uniforms that can be provided. I mean, why should we be fundraising so that everybody can get a nice mug with a big N on it? Thank you for your contribution. Seniors get a gift. Okay, I kind of get that. You know, thank you for your 4 years and all of that for playing. But all this other stuff, you know, paying custodians for use of facilities. I mean, I've tried to cut back on much of that as I can. Really? So they're fundraising so then they can cut a check for $300 to the school department for holding something in the cafeteria. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. But we've been talking about this forever. And again, I think these are the things that we need to just prioritize and just do them and say, okay, well, $1,500 is going towards this, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to increase the line item for custodians because, you know, we have to keep the building clean and all of that. And so if there's an event, we'll take care of that $300. And you know what? We'll do that for every sport that is going to use the facility, and we'll pay out that line item. This year we'll increase it by $1,000, next year another $1,000, and by the time 5 years comes around, we have an account that allows for us to do that. And then not big, I mean, finding $1,500 is one thing, finding $150,000 is a whole different thing. We'll put some scenarios for you folks for next week.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask, so given kind of our security blanket that everybody, I think, in town thinks that we don't utilize appropriately, or I shouldn't say that. There's sort of skeptics who think that we don't utilize choice funds appropriately, but we always say there's a really valid concern that that money might not be there, right?
Right.
So given the level of competitiveness now, given that some of our neighbors have voted in school choice, is there a concern that our school choice numbers are going to either, I'm not sure that they would drop, because if you already have children in the system, my guess is that they would want to stay here. But we may not have that level of interest that we did going forward, that we did years ago, because now it's not just Norton who's school choice, right? So has that sort of been, I don't know if there's any way to project it, but is that something that's, I'm sure, on your radar screen, your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so yes to that, in terms of, you know, competition means we need to continue to be competitive, which means we need to continue to do things that make us more competitive. And, you know, I've thought about utilizing $100,000 worth of school choice, prioritizing that for a few years to cut fees, transportation and athletic fees. I have. And I don't have a problem recommending that, to be quite honest. Knowing that while the fees are there, while the money is there, we do it. When the money goes away, then we have to reinstitute something else. The problem with fees is always going to be, and I want to get back to your question, but just to answer that part, the problem with fees is the expense line item for transportation and athletic goes up every single year between 3 and 5%. So for transportation this year, it's another $30,000. If we're still only collecting $175,000, we're not. None of that is going towards the $30,000 increase. The $30,000 increase is in the budget, and if 100 less kids take the bus, then you get another hit. So, and the buses are, you know, $60,000 to $70,000 a pop. So, so that's part of the heavy discussions you guys would have to have about, hey, listen, this is what we're going to do with $100,000 or $50,000 or whatever the money would be. And that's a decision you folks can make. I'm more worried, to your comment, Carolyn, about continuing to have slots open without using choice money for staffing. And you know, we know how some of you feel about that. I get it. But I can't recommend open seats or 10 seats at the Yale while I'm moving 2 staff members. I can only recommend 10 more slots or 20 more slots by also saying, and we're going to have to utilize some of those funds towards backfilling positions. I mean, that's the point. Now, every school choice district in the Commonwealth potentially uses choice funds for these types of scenarios. We've talked about it with Karen's office, where, okay, we have the latest technology. We need somebody in the classrooms on a daily basis. So why don't we put that position under school choice and do what we did with full day kindergarten, which was $150,000 in choice, and over 3 years, we moved it into operations. Makes sense, right? It's not a huge hit. It does get prioritized, and so something else has to stay behind. But we're at the point now with technology where it's not actually about buying another $100,000 worth of technology. It's about having people in the classroom to be able to support it. And we've had a bunch of scenarios to do that. And most of those scenarios have been cut from this budget. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't do what we've done in other summers. Somebody goes, somebody else leaves, somebody decides to retire. Now we got a pool of $50,000, same bottom number, same operational bottom number, but we decide we're going to prioritize that staff member situation. So that's the scenario. In middle school and the high school, less of a situation. You'll probably see a recommendation from me that says open school choice and through grade 10. But I think the elementary and the K to 5, I think we're going to have some serious discussions going forward before we have a final vote, and that's going to start taking place on Wednesday. I'll have a recommendation.
Are we maxed out on any? I forget.
No, we're not maxed out in terms of there was 10 slots, all 10 are here, but I can assure you for next year kindergarten I already have 10 phone calls. So if I have 10 slots,
They're lined up at the door that first day that opens.
Yeah.
It's-
Oh, yeah.
Kindergarten.
It speaks to your reputation as a school district.
And it's a lot of our own staff that are bringing their children and their
Yeah.
families here, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
So do we think as other schools in the area are adopting school choice that we'll have our students going there because of offerings, or are we maybe seeing a reduction in if that town,
All of that.
they'll just return to their
Yeah.
town?
I think all of that. One, I think some of our own staff may have a student here K to 5, and then for middle school, they go to private school or high school. I think school districts that haven't had choice before, and you work in that school district, and now you have choice, they're going to bring their kids. So that doesn't necessarily mean we lose kids per se, but it makes it more family oriented. I mean, I'm an example of that. And I think the other part is I'm interested to see what happens in Attleboro, because they're building a $200 million facility with brand new state-of-the-art shops, vocational programming. So I think if they decide to do school choice, and I don't know if they're going to, so I don't want to speak for them in any way. Dave Story, their superintendent, and I had a lot of discussions about a lot of things, including some discussions about how we can have more partnerships together. Us, Seacon, Mansfield, and North Attleboro, and Attleboro, those 5 communities. About how we can collaborate more on special education, how we can collaborate more on college and career readiness, in internships, and so on and so forth. And those are things that you're going to be seeing down the road from us. But that's the one that I have some interest in.
They voted school choice for 2019.
Who did?
It'll be
Attleboro.
Attleboro.
Okay.
It'll be interesting to see if they continue, which I'm sure they will.
Right. So again, competition is competition. Taunton voted it in a few years ago, and most of it has to do with staff, who their kids are going to be in the same building or in one of the buildings here in the community. We're also finally seeing, for the first time, more discussion about choice in public education, because we now have parents who were choice students, right? So their parents sent them to, a charter school or another public school. And as you probably have heard, the federal government is looking to allow for public vouchers for private schools. That's a big discussion that's taking place at the federal level. And that could have a huge impact on what takes place if you're able to take a $10,000 voucher and pay off the bill to a private school, or pay a portion part of the bill. So it'll be interesting to see. So these scenarios that you have before you, really on page 4 of 22, we continue with the positions. No changes there.
We've maintained staffing with the new scenarios.
I would say that the dean of students, if I had to prioritize these, I would say, well, the special ed, the ESL, and the best teachers, those are mandates, so take those out. But when you look at American Sign Language and the music teacher, I think those are definites going forward. I think the floating nurse has to be a definite, and then the dean of students would be the next one. That would allow for us to maintain, because there's no additional administrators being added in any department anywhere, in any building. We're not asking for any other staffing in terms of support staff in that way. It's basically a mandated budget. But again, I want us to get back to discussions about, for example, one of our ideas that we have is to take our current special programs, so physical education, music, art, technology, and library, and making all of those part-time positions full-time positions to allow for better direct services. It's a cost of about $65,000. Yeah.
Not everyone would be
Yeah.
totally full-time. We realign where people are a little bit in order to provide services. So right now, only our second and third grade students receive library from our library and media specialist. So only our second and third grade students actually receive a library class with actual instruction by a certified library and media specialist. So the proposal that Karen and I put together would alternate library and technology. So all students K-3 would get it every other week. It would also allow our K-3 technology teacher to provide some staff support in regards to tech integration. I know that's a position you guys have seen a lot over the last several years, and it's never actually made it all the way through. So this would be an opportunity for us to provide some support. Also making that change would give every student in K-5 2 wellness classes every single week. In K1 and 2, it would be 2 physical education classes. We all know the importance of students in wellness and having that activity. And then in grades 3, 4, and 5, it would be a physical education class and then a health class. So helping to support not only SEL, but good food choices and all of those other components that we're integrating into our wellness curriculum right now, but they're really not getting a lot of direct instruction around those areas. So overall, it's an increase of 1.04 FTEs, and I think the total cost is roughly in the $40,000 range.
Yes.
And I apologize, I think it's roughly that. But overall, I think it would change the dynamic of elementary specials, and it would give staff a lot more support. Here, the technology class would be less about like going into a computer lab because the students have Chromebooks all day long. So it's more of a STEM lab. And the person who would be teaching that is currently split between 2 buildings. She would be here the entire time. So not only is she teaching now a STEM lab, but she's also able to give the 4th and 5th grade teachers that tech integration support. So it's kind of trying to like be as creative as we possibly can with the staff and, you know, at a smaller cost.
What happens with the library in this school?
Currently it's run by parent volunteers.
Do we see that changing it in? So 2nd and 3rd grade currently has a librarian, and then they come to this school, they have nothing.
No, and we're fortunate to have an awesome parent that divides her time between here and the middle school, who, at least correct me if I'm wrong, I believe is a certified librarian. But they're coming and they're picking out books. They're not really getting direct instructions. Teachers don't have that support. It was, you know, that's something that I know Karen, I don't want to speak for Karen, but she puts in every year to maybe have someone splitting their time between here and the middle school.
So that also means too, if you have parent volunteers, then you are staying with your classroom here in the library.
Correct.
You are
It's
not
not a
at prep time.
Right, and so something that we also need to think about is the digital literacy and including research skills and, you know, I hate to say it, but fake news and identifying what's relevant and accurate online, and having collaborative conversations with teachers about supporting classroom instruction.
Or even teaching them about fraud.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
things that come through don't,
And taking a look at your book collection. You know, we laugh.
We laugh about it.
But it's really sad. The books here and at the middle school, and the quality and the age of the books, that, you know, it's wonderful that we have the volunteers who come in and support our kids and try to support literacy. And I know through all of the, you know, like the book fairs that we have, we're able to get books, but who's choosing those books? What types of books? What's the quality? Are they integrated? You know, are they supporting classroom?
Are they culturally diverse?
Exactly. So there's a lot of things to consider. I think, you know, I don't think that people knew this, but we're very, very proud of what our library media specialist has done at the JCS and LG in terms of transforming those spaces, because I think libraries are not just a place where you go and pick out a book. There's so much more to it, and there's a wonderful partnership between her and the parent groups. We actually found out recently that both parent organizations at JCS and LG have been awarded the Parents as Library Supporter Award from the Massachusetts State Library Association because of their work with Julie in collaboration with her to transform those spaces. So we're very proud of that. But again, kindergarten and 1st grade go into the library to check out books, but they're not getting direct instruction. And I think the, correct me if I'm wrong, although the literacy coach
Yeah.
is looking to our library media specialist to help her support at the elementary levels.
So this might be a silly question, but when we have that for second and third grade, but then it falls off, we don't have it at this school or the middle school, aren't those important years for kids coming up into researching and things like that? So is there ever a benefit of switching it from second and third grade to these older kids?
So you have to remember how we even got that position. We couldn't find a Spanish teacher, right? Because that was a prep time for staff.
Okay.
So we got creative, Mrs. Bolton and Mrs. Luke and myself, and said, how about if we try to find a library media specialist to fill that position? And that's where we are today, and why that hasn't been expanded up until this point. And I've advocated, for library media here and at the middle school.
Because is it something that we can have one person?
Absolutely.
Yep.
And the only reason why we have anybody at the high school is because it's mandated.
It's not
mandated,
It's part of your accreditation process. Yes.
And at the high school level, is there any instruction with that, or is that just?
Actually, she does collaborate with different departments when they're doing research. She does provide direct lessons, but that's more of a collaborative partnership between the teachers and the library media specialist, which I would envision would happen at our middle school.
So at least they're getting a little bit of it before they go off to college.
Correct.
Absolutely. And she also oversees our tech and innovation courses at the high school as well.
Joe, is there any way to look into trying to get one person to do this school and the middle school?
I just added it. We've had it in our budget. It was in the budget recommendation. We just took it out in terms of getting down to a number.
Yeah.
But I'll put it back in.
Yeah, I just think it's one of those things, it's tough to go from 2 years of having it second, third grade and then nothing until you get to high school. I think
Yeah,
that.
I think it's at best, it's probably a 2-year implementation where we hire somebody here for 2.5 days and try to then get that person to become, or then post the following year full-time to make it 4 to 8.
Right, but at least we start the process instead of.
Yeah, you're down to a scenario now of where do you cut to get
That's
what
not
A,
hard.
B, or C?
Being
Yeah.
a spotlight school, having a, oh, where'd you go?
That.
It's not part of being a spotlight.
It's not part, but it is a knock on us in terms of, I mean, that library's become more of a conference room space than anything else, which is ridiculous. I mean, we don't even have computers there anymore because it's one-to-one. But could you imagine kids coming in and actually having a working place where they could do research and have somebody lead them through research? And at that grade level, it's probably one of the most important things to start to get them to do, to really understand what is real, what's not, what's appropriate. How do you know that a website doesn't belong to the KKK or some other organization? It's really, really important.
And our entire elementary literacy program is all around developing a love of reading, getting students to engage in authentic texts. And we've done a lot of work in regards to expanding our classroom libraries and expanding grade level book rooms. But it would be really nice if, Julie is involved in some of that work at JCS and LGN. It would be really nice to be able to have someone here that support that work as well.
Okay. And then the remaining pages bring you into scenarios of page 5 of everything to do with choice funds, grants, and so on and so forth.
So very important on the choice funds, with the 9% budget, we had a 268 balance that we were expecting to have available to us. Here, that balance has gone down to 30,000. So we're really expending a lot of our choice funds and our expected choice funds.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah.
So.
And DW is district-wide?
District-wide, yeah.
Yeah. And then everything else is just the numbers change. And again, we'll update this with the changes to the ELL under mandated and all of that stuff for you. I also wanted to talk just so that as you see these scenarios, you know, if the scenario was 3%, then we have to cut a minimum of 3.15% more, just to give you a scenario. So the discussions I'm trying to have is how can we get more, but then also what can we offset it to the fall town? And I know that some folks, you know, that can only happen for so long.
Because that's free cash.
Yes. But, you know, do we put off those things that we can put off for that time period? You know, in this budget, you know, Wade, for example, Wade's department could use about another $65,000 worth of just those preventative maintenance and upgrades that need to happen, so that we're not looking at, you know, things not working, which is, to me, is not bad, not good management, right? When things stop working. But we've already slashed his budget by another 50% of that. So there's only 30,000 or 31,000 in the budget reflective of that. So that could be an area where we cut. My concern about preventative maintenance and all of that is that it's a long-term, more costly item. And I think we have a responsibility to that. When we're looking at special education and mandates, besides the positions that are in here that we have to have, what's the number that we're going to use for out-of-district tuition? Are we going to carry something over in the budget? Or what we're going to say is, this is what we know, these are the facts, we know this, and after July 1st, if there are new information, then we go back to the town and say, I can't budget on putting $200,000 off to the side for special education, and, you know, while I'm cutting everywhere else. I have to say, I have 2,400 students, these are our students, this is what we know. If anything comes in after that, it's like an overtime account. I didn't know about it. This is what I do know. And lastly, on this bigger topic is, we are in negotiations with our biggest two unions. You know, about 300 people between the paras and the teachers, about 280 or so. So, you know, this budget is reflective of a number that the subcommittee has, and for the purposes of negotiations, we will go into executive session on Wednesday for the purposes of updating the rest of the committee on what that number is in the budget. And I'm only saying that not because I don't trust anybody, but because negotiations is negotiations, and the school committee should have a number that it feels comfortable with in this budget. So this budget scenario right now has a number. We will potentially change that number based on what you guys do in executive session next week.
I have another question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. So last year when we had one of our joint meetings and we were starting to have that conversation of, you know, come budget season, we take care of those mandated costs first. And in the last minute at one of the joint meetings, we ended up getting that covered.
Say that again?
So one of the last joint meetings last year, we were going through the budget process. We ended up talking about how we needed the mandated positions covered. I think it was like a 4% or something.
Right.
They ended up covering it, right? And then we were talking about moving forward, you know, covering the mandated costs, and then kind of divvying up what's left in the budget. Are those conversations still happening when you're meeting with James and Mike?
Yeah, my comment has been that the mandated budget is the mandated budget is the mandated budget.
Right.
I have to have that percentage for that period.
Because
so
we kept telling them last year that it was the mandates that, you know, we needed that covered, and then we
Right.
had to figure out the rest. It seemed like we were on the same page and had an understanding last year, so I
Right.
just want to make sure going
Yeah,
into
and
this year.
And right now, if the budget came in at 3%, it's about 3% to cover the mandates. So we would have 0 for general education.
And that was the only reason I was being picky about the ELL and is included.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
You're right.
it is, and I just want to make sure that is
I don't like telling you
included in that
you're right.
conversation.
Matt, this is based on the budget that is voted on. This is not when people come back to town hall in the fall and ask for more.
This is what we know at this point in time as of October, the October town meeting. So we received a little bit of extra money in October town meeting, which was 29,957 as our budget, so that those numbers are included.
So this it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, so it's current status of the budget right now.
Because I think that's what we started to do because we saw the other town departments doing that. Is,
Yeah.
You know, okay, well, we'll put this aside, but we're coming in the fall for it.
It's a good way to work, but you know, if you remember last year, we approved a 6.57% budget. That's what we wanted to move forward with. We started July 1st with a 3.9, and then we went back for the $550,000 in October. We got 335. So we ended up right now, we're at a 5.07, that's not 6.57. So we needed that 6.57 was our educational plan. And we'll continue to work like that. I mean, we can work like that, but we have to have probably some better understandings from what we might get in October. So the difference between the 545 and the 335 was considerable. And that's hard to absorb.
The other part of it is that I think we all know that no budget, town side or school side, should be counting on anything in October. Right? I mean, it's either for overtime or for special ed or for anything.
Yet we all do.
But yet we all do, and my concern is it's going to catch up, but we're playing two-part catch-up. The first part catch-up is that you're putting money off to the side, for the things to the side for the fall town meeting, and I know that there are some folks within the community who said, until Joe Byetta got here, we never heard from the school department in the fall town meeting. Well, that's the reason why we're asking for 5 and 6% increases, because there was, well, first of all, there wasn't the heightened attention to what we're trying to do, which is to not put one budget against the other, right? We're not trying to do mandates versus general ed, we're trying to support all students. But I think the other part that it speaks to is the long-term planning of what we've been doing for the last 7 years. I would say actually 10 years, but the 7 I can speak to, which is working through Jean's office and the principals and everything else and all the other staff, is taking a look at how do we keep students in district at a better cost and we think better programming, to the point that we can. And that's the reason why the next level of collaboration isn't just the collaborative or just the private schools. I think, and Vinny Haywood specifically has been a proponent of this, where he has, bless you, where he has a few students in a certain program, and his argument is, let's sell this program to a local district and tuition students into our school at no cost to us, and actually offsetting the cost of personnel, as I mentioned the other day at the joint meeting. And I think that's the next level of collaboration, for lack of a better word. And part of it is, as Jean more than anyone else, and Matt to a certain extension knows, BICO its doors are practically closing. They have no space for programming right now. They're looking at the 3rd floor of the Summit building on Route 1. They've reached out to Rentham, Plainville, and Norfolk about space.
So their doors aren't closing, they're busting, because they have so many students.
Better word.
Their doors are, they're closing.
Yes, they're doing very well.
Let me rephrase that.
In
They're
terms of
busting.
referrals.
Just like I am. Busting. It's not funny. When you look at it, part of it is the issues of the students. I mentioned it the other day. When you have a student who is in school for 5 to 10 days and spends the next X number of days hospitalized, what do you do? What do you do with students who do something inappropriate in school and you have a concern of safety? You can only suspend students for so long without causing a total hardship on that child for potentially the rest of their lives. And we're not talking about an 18-year-old. We're talking about, 10-year-olds and 7-year-olds and so on. Or the student that goes right into a collaborative the first day of kindergarten because of their needs. Or the student who all of a sudden in 6th grade has a total mental breakdown and now needs to go to a specialized program. It's pretty significant. I'm not trying to play a poor us story, because I think we do a lot of good things, but these are so specialized situations. If I could, I'd love for you to come spend a day, and really it's not appropriate, so I'm not asking you to do this, but I'd love.
Invited, but you're not.
Just kidding, not invited.
My choice of words today are the
Have we got a dictionary in the room?
If we could legally allow for school committee members to sit in a specialized classroom and see what takes place in some of our classrooms, I think you would be wowed on what we're doing, how we're doing it, and you're probably not gonna believe what we're doing.
I think we could legally, if anyone was interested, give you a tour of the programs and you could get a taste of how the programs operate.
As long as it's an individual tour, not a collective tour.
I would love to do something like that.
Okay, we can set that up for you.
Yeah.
Jean will be happy to do that
Thanks
with
for
you.
inviting me, Jean.
That's not nice.
Well, you are Boston, so. Continue, sorry, I'll stop now. It's a little fun.
The other thing that I think is important is if we want to add the library media specialist, if we want to add some scenario of fees, then this 6.15 is going to go up. Or I have to tell you that here's the priorities. And so you could create a budget that is, this is what we have to have, and then priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, we could have that voted in. So when the summertime comes, if in fact anything moves, I can say, hey, I'm taking care of priority 1. So, and just as you know, when I do those in the summer, I just inform you. I don't ask for a vote because it doesn't change the bottom number. And I appreciate that you folks do that because not every school committee does. But you've always treated us to say, just communicate with us. As long as it doesn't change the bottom number, we're supportive of it. And we've done that in creating positions in the district or reinstating positions in the district.
But with this 6 point whatever budget, you're leaving, it's leaving school choice with $32,000.
Yes, that is correct.
And we know that one school committee member is going to have a real hard time with that.
Well, there's a couple.
So, and again, it's a scenario because that school choice number could be a little higher for us. We could get some more funding just because of the scenarios. But you can't say we're not using it.
When does school choice open and close for?
We'll open after you vote. We usually, after you vote, we give ourselves usually a good month, and usually we open right around April 1st, second week of April.
You have to know or have a rough idea of who's coming back, correct?
Right, so we project out who's graduating, if any, and then what we think are scenarios. I think it's 1. But then we have scenarios of what do I think, and I usually say, you know, we're probably going to lose 5 to 8 students. We're probably going to pick up 15 or 20. So we're at 138. I'm going to project that we're going to be close to 150 next year. That's going to be my projection. But we'll have more than those seats available. I just have to really take a look at some of these scenarios that we're doing and saying, well, I really can't recommend school choice at a high number in this grade level. We typically also we don't break up families as part of your policy. So we might have a student that's in 5th grade and now they have a younger sibling that's entering kindergarten.
So it would be taking a gamble then if we did decrease the school choice to that 30,000 without really knowing what we have coming in. But the things that we could start to implement, we could kind of get into the budget, you know, have a 2-year plan or whatever. So it's a gamble for a period of time, right? Until we know what school choice looks like the next year.
It's always a gamble, yeah. I mean, I hate to be so negative, but what happens if tomorrow morning we're closing buildings because of the coronavirus and, you know, and I mean, anything can happen.
There's always something.
There's always something.
Right.
What we try to do is we try to look at the past and what we're hearing. I would say that this year, based upon the number of emails and phone calls that we've gotten about school choice as early as December and January of this year, I think our numbers are going to be fine. But we're going to have a discussion about the utilization of these funds. And I mean, right now we're projecting in our budget, we can only project that we're going to have 138 kids next year because that's the money that we're projecting to be getting.
Right.
So that 32,000, that is projecting what we're taking in for next year.
Correct.
Yeah. Based on
Department of Revenue is basically saying you're getting 800 and something thousand dollars.
812,000. We're planning to carry over 230,000. So we will be investing that full 1.1 million.
So we're gonna have $32,000 as of July 1st.
Actually, the payments don't start really coming in until December.
So yeah, so we receive payments monthly, and that's kind of the interesting piece about school choices. We have to spend everything between probably July and November. So most of that $1 million will be spent in that point in time. So we will purchase it all through budgetary funds and reduce other account lines to
And then
support
backfill.
that. And then as the money comes in on a monthly basis, we will make the transfer of those expenses
So
back
then
to
that
surplus.
account would not go back up until the following school year.
That's correct.
So that would leave us
We'd know
$32,000.
we would know January
Yeah.
21st to 22nd
Also-
of every year when the House 1 comes out.
Yeah, it
So wait, so
also,
wait a minute, you have to, what did you just say, David?
So my thought would be, we're gonna have a real long year with only $32,000 at our
of potential
disposal.
capacity. And that does not, in the past couple of years, we've had carryover of $250,000. So this is planning for no carryover into your FY '22 budget. So this is not gonna support that, a budget of 6% at that point in time.
Okay,
So
so
we are
I was off in my
really-
thinking. I thought it was only a short period
Yeah,
of
we're in
time.
a situation where, you know, we've always made it work, and we're starting to move past that.
We're using too many choice
Too many.
to operate the budget.
Yeah.
Choice should be the things that we say are not in the budget that we're going to potentially need. So, I'll give you a scenario. Do we need to have a discussion down the road? I'm sorry, Karen, I'm saying that right now, but do we have to have a discussion about bring your own device? Where we're offering the potential for people to purchase devices and all of that through a third source, and we're offsetting those students but you have to bring your own device. I mean, it's a scenario that we don't have the support staff for. We just don't. I'm sorry?
You can't do that for testing. We have
Right.
to be able to manage the devices.
Right.
So
State testing,
because the state is now requiring us to do
state testing online.
all online testing,
Or all
we
grade
still
levels.
have to be able to manage those devices. So we would have to be creative. I mean, we could certainly do a BYOD, but then we're gonna need to have at least a grade level's worth of devices on carts that we could use for testing purposes.
Which is, I mean, the first year that we did it, we actually moved computers from one building to another building to actually be able to do that.
Yeah.
It's not a good idea, don't get me wrong,
Is
but
there, there are rules of how potentially choice money is supposed to be spent, correct?
basically it's under your guidance to do pretty much as you wish. It's supposed to be to enhance the educational process of students. So in other words, I think it's key that the word enhancement is used, right?
Okay.
And so that's what we've done, right? We've taken funds and be able to do our one-to-one purchase curriculum, which has enhanced our
Exactly.
district, right? Or help, you could make an argument, I know it's not a philosophy of some of you, but to mediate class size problem, we're gonna hire a teacher. To hire the technician, to hire the library media specialist, to all of those enhance the education. It should be going directly to enhancing students' education. Could you spend a one-time upgrade in a science lab? Sure, you could do that. You're allowed to do that. But you can't necessarily just count on these funds as just, offsetting, balancing your budget, for lack of a better phrase. I mean, I'm sure there's some people in town that say, hey, let's give them zero because I got 812,000. I'm sure that they're available. I'm sure that we have staff who think that. But I also think it's important to recognize that we're at the point that our success is our success, which is great, check. But we have to start thinking a little differently about some of this stuff in order to be able to have a lasting, I mean, I hate to say it this way, but because of competition, because of enrollment and all that other stuff, I don't think we're ever gonna have 250 school choice students in our district. I think it's always gonna be in the hundreds of something. Maybe we can get to 175, 180, maybe 200, but I don't think it'll go above that. And again, I think you could only do that if you said, well, for certain grades, because of the bubble, we're gonna actually offset the cost of a teacher year one. We did that for an entire kindergarten program. And then year two, we cut it by X dollars and so on. We really can't do that with some of our technology because of our leases. In terms of, for example, 8th graders are in their 3rd year of their 3-year, so next year when they go to freshman year, they potentially are getting new technology and they'll probably keep that for 4 years, right? So you're doing that every 9th grade cycle, every 6th grade cycle. So, and due to Karen's work and support from Matt's office, I mean, the prices that we're getting are darn good. probably the most competitive around, I would say. I don't think there's too many more districts that do it for the price that we're doing it at, but still, there's a cost.
It's all Karen, I just signed the contract.
So can I ask you a question?
Yes.
A couple of school committee meetings ago, we were talking about a change in the funding formula from the state, is that correct?
That's correct.
So how does that impact any of these?
It doesn't. So the Student Opportunity Act funds, 72,000 that we're getting, is in that budget.
Okay.
And it's gonna take care of a position that we're being mandated to have. So it's either gonna go towards the ELL position or the special ed position. We're actually put out a survey, as you know, to parents, involvement, and I gave you a timeline of events that we're gonna have on Thursday night of how we're gonna put forward the Student Opportunity Act. I'm going to the State House next Tuesday, I think,
Tuesday.
with Jen. We're meeting with Senator Feeney, and I'm going to tell him that the Student Opportunity Act is a farce for 183 districts. You are asking us to do a short form accountability form, and you gave me nothing above the hold harmless framework, $30 per student. So could you please file an amendment now that says we don't have to do it? Because you're not giving me any money. Now, if you're getting $31 per student, then my argument would be the first 30, you don't have to do anything for. It's that $1 that you have to do something for. So if you're a district getting $1,200 per student, the first 30, you shouldn't have to do anything. It's the remaining, because that's the extra funding over 7 years that they're guaranteeing us. So you're guaranteeing me today $30 per student for the next 7 years. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm such a jerk about this stuff that, as some of you know privately, I've said to you, keep your $72,000. If I could do that, if our budget wasn't what it is, I'd say keep it. Just like, the discussions I had years ago when the federal money came in, and I'm like, you're getting $100,000 over 3 years, but you're asking me to work, to create $60,000 worth of work every year. It's like certain grants we don't apply for because the amount of work that they want for that grant isn't worth the $5,000. And then the grants that we do want, we don't fit into because we don't have the 40 rule. We don't have 40% free reduced lunch, 40% minority, 40% this, 40% that. We just don't. It's not us as a community.
And that 72,000, if I remember correctly, we might not get that whole amount, right? Wasn't that one of the talks?
So what's happening?
But we have to.
So what's happening that's really interesting? First of all, we will get it because that's the way it works here. But the discussion that's happening, and this happened at a meeting, was, I won't say who, but someone high up said, well, if you're getting $1.5 million, it's going to the town and then to you. You might want to just cut a deal and say, here's $200,000 for you. And I practically had a heart attack as I said, wait a minute. If you just voted to support money for education, and now you're saying, oh, by the way, you can give $200,000 to the town for the new truck. Are you kidding me? This is what's happening out there. And I'm going to, Senator Feeney knows I'm pretty blunt, so he's going to get it from me. And by the way, he's a great supporter. But I'm going to tell him outright, on behalf of the Norton School Committee and the town of Norton, you need to file an amendment to this law in this budget. It needs to happen. And they're going to tell me, well, the time to file the bills is too late, and so on and so forth. I'm going to say, so when does it open up again? Because I expect to see that bill. I expect to see that amendment filed. And then I'm going to say the same thing to the House members and say, this is a farce, guys. You voted on a farce. And by the way, it was the Senate that did not want the Student Opportunity Act paperwork. It was the House that said, we don't want, quote, the money to be spent on raises. So a district that's getting $21 million, they don't want it to go towards a 3-year contract agreement where half of that money is going to go pay salaries. That's the only reason why we have this paperwork. I mean, they call it Student Opportunity Act and short form and long form. That's the only reason why it's there. And they tied it to 4 areas.
Well, and the short form is not very short.
And the short form is not very short.
Quite a considerable amount of work.
I mean, I would like to say that we're going to spend 25 cents on toilet paper because that's good for kids. 39 cents on copy paper. That's what we should be filing, so they can read the darn thing and spend the amount of time.
What do you think the chances are that they even read it?
Well, that's one. And two, my chance is you are taking, so the school committee has voted on this, approved it, because that's what you're going to have to do, and you're going to reject it? Really? You're gonna reject it. What happens if I don't file it? You're gonna keep I'm violating the law. Quote, you can't, this was a high up that said at the meeting, Jen was there, well, you can't violate the law. Really? I can if 3 of the 5 members I work for tell me to violate the law. I'm not filing it. That's what it's going to. My point is that's what it's going to take. It's going to take some type of nope, we're not doing this. And I've told some of my colleagues in the other 182 districts, let's not file it. See what happens. Go ahead. You're going to keep the 72,000? Really? Okay, let's go through that paperwork. Because I think the only way that this is going to be fixed is eventually the 183 districts are going to have to come together and put some money aside and say, well, it didn't get fixed for us, we're going to sue the state. So it's not about the cities anymore. Clearly it's not about the cities anymore. But I'll tell you, our colleagues in Attleboro, they got $3 million last year, they're getting $1.5 million this year, and they're like, how can we get less money? I mean, and they have, I think it's one of the best city public school systems around, to be quite honest. And I don't say that because we're neighbors. I know a lot of the stuff they're doing over there, and they do a great job. But at what point are we going to get out of this business? I'm beating a dead horse, so I'll stop.
I think I hit a nerve.
Yeah, there's a state rep seat open in my hometown, and I can tell you I've thought about running. Because I'm so sick and tired of people not doing their job.
You'd be sensitive day one.
I'd have to quit this job. I'm okay with that. You got at some point you got to elect people, and I say, I'm not trying to say this disrespectfully. They need to count on people that are doing the job on what these bills look like. I mean, the circuit breaker transportation is not currently funded in the budget recommendation. But it's in the law that was supposed to be the number that keeps the 183 of us happy, or happier. Right, so if we're gonna get circuit breaker transportation reimbursement at 25%, and we get 250,000, that makes us happier, even though we only got 30,000. That was the intent, that was the deal that was struck. They're gonna tell you it wasn't, but that was the deal that was struck. I know it was. You can quote me on that.
You ran out of tape a while ago.
Hopefully you did. Other thoughts, questions, concerns? So we have homework for you.
I just think it's just, we just have these conversations every year. We have the conversations at the state level. We have them sort of here in our own town level. That's just exhausting and frustrating. It goes nowhere. And it feels like when we thought we might have a little extra support from the state, it goes nowhere. And we hope that we have support from the town, but I think that everybody needs to really get a sense of the work that goes into offering students in Norton the best education possible on a really limited, extremely limited budget.
Well, I sent out a cartoon yesterday to my staff. I do a Just Thinking almost every Friday. And I sent out my my Just Thinking for this week was a cartoon. Those of you that work for me that have opened it up, and basically the cartoon is the citizens yelling at the legislature and saying, basically, do your job, because we're not getting it, Just Thinking is just that. It's just a Just Thinking. I'm not mandating anybody to do anything. I'm not asking people to do anything. It's just my thinking. I know what I'm doing in the ballot this year when I go to vote in my local races. So, regardless of R's or D's, if they have the word incumbent, I know exactly what I'm doing. So, for what it's worth.
So because of the questions that we've asked and the things that we'd like to see in the budget, we do not have to vote on the budget.
No, we always take our vote at the next meeting anyways. So what we'll do is we're going to make the changes to ELL with the mandates.
Yeah.
We're going to add the 4 to 8 library media specialists, either full-time for 4 to 8 or part-time combination. We'll see. We're going to create some fee scenarios for you to look at. And we're gonna come back with some potential changes to school choice.
When do we, When do we owe the final number to the town hall?
We should vote it this coming Wednesday, because it takes about 2 weeks for us to put the whole budget together, double check it. We need to do a couple of line item checks that we, to be quite honest, were in the wrong place last year, and I need to star those as part of the budget, so then I can have it written out that it's not a 100% increase of that line item, it's just a change of the line item because it was in the wrong place, so that people can really see that. An example, Vinnie Cersei's position doesn't belong with Gene Sullivan's position.
Yeah, so within this budget, if you look at Gene, the Director of Special Education line, it has a decrease of $180,000. We're not cutting $180,000. We've moved Vinnie into a Director of Guidance line. We've moved Sam Stone, formerly Sam Gamilla, into a financial analyst line. So now that Director of Special Education is just
change their name.
Yeah, just the other day.
I'm changing my name. When does I retire? So we will make those changes. We're continuing to meet with Mike as soon as he's getting better numbers, for lack of a better, and then we'll, to be quite honest, the scenario that we would like to present, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn because Matt's been there, Matt, myself, Mike, and James would like to see, can we come up with the number that we say is the number for town meeting in June, or in May, with an understanding of what goes forward to the fall. That's what we would like to see, and be able to, all four of us, say to our boards, this is what is the scenario that, as the appointed specialists, managers of the town, we would like the town to vote on. Doesn't mean that town meeting doesn't like it, or the FinCom doesn't like it, but more of a balanced approach, so that we have an understanding and we can have a town meeting where there's consensus with an understanding of what's happening. Of course, the four of us have to trust each other in this. So that's what I'm going to be putting out to my board, and I would be asking I'll probably put it in writing so that it covers everybody, that this is what we want to do. That's what we would like to do. I can't say that I'm going to give in to something that I don't think is good for Norton Public Schools. I can't, but I have no problem also saying I'm sorry, I can't agree to this.
I know it was an extra meeting for you and Matt to go to on a regular basis, but I really do want to thank you guys and Mike and James for taking part in this, because I do think it's been a huge help. That you guys have been meeting regularly for, I think, since school got back into session. I think that it changes the whole dynamic of the budget season. So I appreciate the four of you taking the extra time to meet and kind of work together, because that is exactly how Norton should be functioning.
Yeah, and the four of us we get along really well.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no, we put difficult discussions on the table,
right.
And we try to keep them as private as we can, because allowing for those scenarios allows for us to build trust within each other, and both Mike and James have been willing, and I have to tell you, James is an incredibly bright guy, not to take anything away from Mike, but James really, he's like him, he gets into that nitty-gritty of the numbers, I wish, not to speak for him, but I also know that he knows that these scenarios with the budget are getting to a point where that something's going to have to break.
Right.
And whatever the citizens think, and
I just think it's nice the working together so that both sides are seen, by you guys, both of you. I think for a long time it was the schools didn't really understand what the town side did, and the town didn't really understand what the schools did. So I think it's a nice working group, and you guys can really.
Well, I think just getting FinCom involved as well, like they didn't understand either.
Well, I think having the subcommittee, I think it's just helpful. We're finally starting to move in the right direction.
Yeah, and I received, as some of you know, I received a very nice email from the chair of the Finance Committee, just that he's received positive comments about the willingness to just get into the nitty-gritty of our budget more.
Right.
And we have another meeting on the 12th, which we plan to do literally salaries by line item. These scenarios here will be presented to them more specifically, so that they can really take a look at revolving accounts and grants, and showing them, hey, $580,000 is going towards staffing in special education, and here they all are, and so on. All of this has always been available, but when we publish an 80-page budget, I'm not sure that people really understand what page 14 is talking about. And clearly that was evident as part of the meeting the other day, where our budgets are available, but people are really unsure how it happens, which is fine. I mean, people do think that we move a lot of money around. The fact of the matter is we have 4 major line items that have to be voted by you folks. You did it this past year. I think we moved $160,000, you know, at the end of the year to pay all our expenses without having to go back to reserve accounts from the town. That just tells you how tight our budget is. But if people want, you know, we don't have to vote, but if we're moving 50,000 from this line to move to that line, it's within those 4 lines. If it's within the one line, 50, it is what it is. If people want to question that, most of it, as you know, is personnel and expenses that we don't know about when we start. I'd like to finish today, if we could, with any questions, of course, you have, but I want to talk about the articles. Specifically, that we have filed articles on your behalf for the special town meeting, just in case there's an issue with our budget the remainder of the year. The student who walks in for the remainder of the year that costs us X number of dollars and we don't have it budgeted. That's just as safe. I don't necessarily anticipate us using it. The borrowing item for the windows will offset the cost of the asbestos situation because the money was voted and it's there. But that budget is about a $500,000 increase for the asbestos. So we already talked to Mike about it. The money's there anyways. We don't need another article for that. But we are in a process to not have to pay that $500,000. So I'll leave it at that. Not only negotiating, but meeting with council as needed to say, you know what, we don't need to, we don't feel we have a responsibility to this money. So I just want everybody to know publicly, without getting into specifics, because it is negotiations and all of that, that, you know, our goal is to have that remediation. Now, it made the building a better building long-term anyways, but the fact of the matter is, I just wanted you to know that. And then the third part is I forwarded to you the articles for the Town Hall, Senior Center, Community Center, and the athletic complex. And as you know, there are articles there that are all about purchasing land or borrowing to purchase and all of that. For both scenarios, both the town hall and together or separate, so that's actually makes up 3 of the articles. Then we have one article that is just about the town and the senior center, and then we have one article, which is the one that we published, that actually has the scenario of all 3. So that's going to be up to the Board of Selectmen to decide. I guess from what I've learned the other day, that if it's a petitioned article by citizens, it automatically just goes to town meeting. I have some serious reservations about that. And how can a petition that's illegal go forward and still be acted on? I don't understand that. I am not trying to have this discussion again because it's their decision, not mine, but I think I'd like to look into that a little bit more. But then, what does that mean when a board puts a petition? Does that mean when a board puts a petition forward, like a school committee, that the selectmen can either accept it or reject it? I guess the practice has been not to. So, what does that mean for the 3 pieces of article that we forwarded? Does that mean that automatically goes forward as well? Or does the board say, well, these are the articles, but we're only recommending Article 1, and does that mean that the other 2 articles don't even get printed? I don't know. That's a scenario I think I'd like to have you folks ask the Board of Selectmen.
So is that something that we can discuss that? Because I think what I was also going to ask you if we get the next joint meeting set up, because I think that we talked about meeting monthly, I think we need to. And maybe having some of the people from the Charter Commission there to talk on some of these questions that we may have. They're typically there anyway. I know Laura Parker was there.
Yeah, I think
maybe we have, because I know that they have a lot of information about our charter that they might be able to answer some of these questions.
Sure.
So maybe if we schedule the next joint meeting and ask.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know when your next joint meeting is going to take place, only because all of those boards are meeting pretty regularly in terms of getting ready for town meeting.
Yeah.
But I'll put it forward, and I'll put everybody in the email so that everybody knows that there's a request.
Yeah, I think that we can have at least one more before
right.
the spring meeting would be helpful.
Right, and so I guess the question would be, if we do have one more, then we also have potential changes of personnel, because you have an election in April. So do we want to do it before then?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll put.
Maybe our first meeting in April.
Okay.
School committee,
I'll put it.
invite.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just put it on my things to do.
Okay.
But I just think it's with no disrespect to the comments that were made at the meeting, so I'm not questioning the response that I received about articles. I questioned the process, and it was noted that I wasn't here. That's that the discussion had taken place. It might have, but I'm not sure that formally it ever came to the school committee. I never saw a memo or something that said, please come because this article impacts you. I didn't want to get into that discussion the other day, but I'm not in charge of the articles. You are. You're in charge of policy and money. I'm in charge of the day-to-day operations. So again, I don't want to get into a back and forth, but I'd like some clarity on that going forward at a joint meeting. That I think if it involves any department, that who's ever responsible for that department should be called to come in front and say, what do you think? Instead of just being told that a petition goes forward, which is fine. I still think that petition should go forward with a recommendation. I mean, take a stand. I think that's what we asked for as part of that joint meeting the other day about that particular article, and I don't think we got one.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I know we didn't get one. So, and if it's because the petition goes forward anyways, that's fine. I don't care who files a petition. It's not my town. I could care less. But I do think that petitions that are filed that have some issues of legality, I mean, so you get voted 40,000 and then you guys just say, we're not doing anything. We're the board. We're responsible for the school department. We're not going to vote. We're not going to do anything. Not then what? What does that mean? I mean, can we have some absurd third party come forward? This wasn't absurd, so I'm not calling the few people who petitioned this absurd, but can we have a organization that's known to be negative come forward and say, and we'd like $40,000 to request a study of the police department, even though they all belong to a racist group or something? It makes no sense to me. It makes absolutely.
We just ask for clarification. We have the charter commission, have somebody there, and we just ask the questions. I think that's your first agenda item for that joint meeting. I think that we definitely need clarification. I mean, listen, these joint meetings have just really started. And I think that there's a lot of work to be done to really work together and kind of stop the divide that's been going on for many, many years in this town. So I think that, we all have to have open minds and just start the discussion. Well, that's part of the issue. The discussion has never been had, so let's have it.
What bothered me about the discussion, and since we're being taped, I can say it, and I didn't say it the other day, but I was chastised for putting forward an article for full-day kindergarten. I was circumventing the budgetary process, is what I was told. That happened 5 years ago. Some of you weren't on the board, on the school committee. We did an article, we filed an article to hold outside of the operating budget potential funding to start full-day kindergarten. Didn't even have a number amount. And I got told, it's on tape, I was told at FinCom, well, you're circumventing the budgetary process by doing an operation, an article. I said, well, that wasn't my intent. My intent was I didn't know where the money was coming from, so I had a deadline to file an article. The article doesn't even have money on it. But if you're a petitioner, the process is, quote, legal counsel has said, don't touch it, it just goes forward. Okay.
That's why I think it's important, though, to have these conversations with all three committees together. Because I think when that happened, we weren't at that place. So you went in front of the finance committee and that was their answer. But I think that for all of us to have I think when you're all in the same room and you ask questions, you get, answers and everybody hears what the answers are. So that's why I think that we just need to have that as our agenda topic for the next joint meeting, ask the questions, and then we all hear the same answer.
Yeah, when are the Charter Commission reviews recommendation going forward? Is it this town meeting?
Yes.
No,
Yes?
I believe it is.
I didn't think so.
I think it is this time, because I had to have all the recommendations done by January. I believe it is this.
Actually, you might be right.
But I think it's a two-part process.
We're voting on it next year, I think. It goes to the town. Might be spring.
I think it's spring, and it might be the second part would be fall, but I don't know if there's a two-part voting process like there is for like a special election, but I believe
I think this spring they had to go to the state I think they have to present to the state.
And isn't it vice versa? You have to vote first, then it goes to the state?
Yeah, well,
I
the
think
state
so.
has to verify the changes.
Maybe there's a legal review that needs to happen.
I don't know.
But
Well, I think
yeah,
it-
whatever the case is.
I think it depends on the changes for the simple fact if you're changing your town form of government that has some state implications.
Right,
I don't know what those are, but.
sure, it has implications for us
Yeah.
in terms of
A
how that
simple
goes.
email to her and she'll be able to explain the whole thing.
Okay.
She's very knowledgeable.
I have no other information unless members of my team and the school committee
I had
does.
one quick question
No.
as I was thinking about it.
Did you say no?
Do any of the other town departments have mandated costs associated with their departments?
Contracts,
Okay.
I
So,
would say.
Fire,
Uh,
ambulance, police.
Fire, plant, ambulance, police have
Yeah.
federal and state requirements,
okay.
and
So-
then contractual requirements.
Is there any scenario where, and this is just a thought, all of the mandatory budget needs are taken off the top from the town budget, and then we kind of go through the rest?
Yeah, I mean, that's come up before. I mean, I think the issue here is that we're at a situation with most of our budgets that are required in terms of like contracts, mandates. Ours is a little different only because it fluctuates a lot more than maybe theirs does. But, I mean, that's a discussion that could also take place and say, listen, what do our mandates really look like? I don't know. I just don't know that answer.
Okay. See, was a quick question.
No.
Anybody else? Motion to adjourn? So moved.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.